Well, I'm going to start. Oh, yeah, please keep your questions to yourself, and then we'll go through them towards the end. Um, Excellent. Hello, everybody, people here in the Ashworth Centre in London, and to all of you who are joining online. My name is Alexis. I'm the outreach coordinator here at Lincoln's Inn. Yeah, once again, I just want to thank you all for being here. It's not easy giving up time and traveling sometimes halfway across the world to be here today, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I will just cover a little bit of housekeeping before we crack on. So this event will run in two halves. The staff presentation about the inn will be run by me for about half an hour if I speak quickly enough. And then there'll be a short break, and then we've got two of our barrister panelists who'll be sharing a little bit about themselves and their journey to the bar. And yeah, and then there'll be a Q&A at the end of that as well, where you guys can ask your questions directly to them. I'll introduce them a little bit more later. We're not expecting any fire alarms today, so if the alarm does sound, please follow the green signs out of the building via the route that you came in, and members of staff will be able to direct you. For the Q&A at the end, if you are joining us remotely, please use the Q&A tab on the Zoom banner rather than the chat function. Those attending in person will be invited to raise their hand, and one of the team will bring a microphone over to you. So now I'm just going to crack on. And there's no better way to start a presentation than with a quiz. So I've put together a quick true or false quiz. If you guys want to scan the QR codes, and then we'll just go through the questions together. Those of you joining at home, I'd also recommend that you do so and scan the QR code and get stuck in. I'm not actually sure how this looks for you guys yet, so yeah. Does it have all the questions or just the first one? It has all of them. Perfect. So make sure you put the name part in there. Oh, here we go, my word cloud. Hi, Colleen Light, wherever you may be. It's actually pretty cool. Let's see at the front row if you. No, that's okay. Right, okay. I feel like I could probably watch this cloud fill up forever, to be honest, but we're going to go to the first question. So barristers spend all day in court. 95% of you said false. Ever a decreasing amount of you said true. Can you show the correct answer, please? The answer was false. Well done. Love you guys. Does it show if you got it correct already? Or not until after I click it? Oh, so you guys know what you got wrong or right already. That's fine. We'll keep going. Next question, please. Ooh, barristers get to give grand speeches in court. Oh, I see. It already comes up with the correct answer. 55% of you got that correct. Incorrect, sorry. The correct answer is false. It's not quite like American courts. There isn't like a big rousing speech at the end. Harvey Specter style, unfortunately. Next question, please. Barristers can represent their clients even if they know they're guilty such lying. The answer is true, up until a point. Obviously, as barristers, there will be times when you are representing somebody who is guilty, but it's also about making sure that you're advocating for the types of sentencing that they get as well. So there will be times when you need to make sure that the crime fits the punishment, and you'll be defending your client that way. Sorry to the 27% of you who got that wrong. Next question, please. Most barristers work in criminal cases. Yep, that's false. Obviously, barristers can work across all sectors, as I'm sure many of you are aware of, and that's probably why you're here today, quite frankly. Next. Becoming a barrister is highly competitive. 98% of you said true. The 2% of you, very confident. I respect it. Uh, it's a competition, but not for us. Well done. Yes, it is highly competitive. Everyone's trying to sort of find out what the best ways to do this are. And again, that's why we run events like this, so we can give you some advice and you guys can ask how other people have managed to get through the process. Next question. You need a good degree to become a barrister. This is true. Not necessarily in terms of the subject area. I think that's kind of where people get a little bit mixed up here. We are, well, when it comes to applying for roles and getting through the process, those with the top grades will have better opportunities and chances. So if you're looking at a first and a 2-1, you're definitely going to be in a better position than others. Obviously, there are extenuating circumstances, which you'll have, I'm sure, plenty of opportunity to explain when you get to those sort of applications. But really and truly, you want to be trying to aim for a top grade, no matter what degree you end up going with. Next. You need to study law at university to become a barrister. It's false. So, as I'll explain a little bit later, you can do another degree at university and then convert using the, law conversion course. It's a pretty straightforward process. It's an additional year on top of your degree. Some people prefer to do it that way because they get to spend the 3 years focusing on something perhaps that they might be a little bit more engaged with, and then they can do the law conversion afterwards. Some people just love law, as I presume many of you in here do, and would want to get stuck in a little bit earlier, but those are the options. So if you do another degree, you could do the extra year to convert your course and then go on to do the bar course after that. Next. Most barristers are their own boss. It's true. Most barristers are self-employed. There are a handful that work with sort of like government bodies, like one of our panelists today. And yeah, there's a lot of freedom and flexibility with that. A lot of pros, a lot of cons, I presume, as well. I guess it's all about understanding what the options are and which one's going to be right for you. So I managed to get one of each today for you guys, which is actually a very rare treat to have them both in the same room. So count your stars and be sure to write positive feedback about me in your emails. Okay, we're going to move on to the first slide. So the 4 Inns of Court, as I'm sure you're all aware, Lincoln's, Inner, Middle, and Grays. And there's a lot of healthy competition between the 4 of us, but ultimately we work very closely together to uphold the standards across the bar in general. My counterparts at the other ends also run events like these. So if you are interested, I would definitely recommend checking them all out if you get the opportunity to sign up for them. But what we are professional associations for barristers and judges in England and Wales. We are the only organizations that have the power to call those that are qualified to the bar. We play a fundamental role in preparing students for call through educational activities. And after call, we support our members as they progress to professional competence as barristers. We also have supervisory and disciplinary functions. So if anyone's disbarred or if anything or any complaints come up, they usually come back to the inn to sort of be sorted out after that. And all 4 inns have libraries, dining facilities, gardens, accommodations, and a chapel for use of their members to train and practice in. And we're also landlords. I think that's kind of where a big chunk of the money comes from. So we have chambers. We also have private tenants who live here as well. Most of them are members. But also, if anything that you've seen today looks familiar, we are a pretty popular filming location. Basically because each section of the inn is about 100 years different to another one. So it's like perfect for like period dramas, especially with all the production companies being like down the road in Soho, essentially. Now, when it gets to getting onto the bar, this is kind of the route. I've tried to simplify as best as I can. I might change that blue color for the next time I run this. But essentially, if you're studying law, you would do your qualifying law degree. You'd make your arrangements for the bar course. So you would figure out which of the bar course providers you might decide to go with. Then you would join in of court, which has to be done before you start your bar course. Then you would do your bar course and your qualifying sessions. So all of the fun stuff happens with your bar course provider. So all the exams, essays, and majority of your lectures are going to be done with whoever you decide to do your bar course with. And then with your in of choice, you'll complete your qualifying sessions, which I will go into a little bit more detail in a little bit. And once you've completed all of that, you'll then be called to the bar. And then you've got even more stuff to do after that. Again, we'll get into that a little bit later. There is also a 4-step pathway. So I basically outlined sort of do your degree, do your bar course, and then you do your pupillage afterwards. But for those of you with perhaps time commitment issues, or if you want to break up your bar course a little bit more, you can actually do your bar course over 2 years instead of one, or over a slightly longer period. So you can split it in half, and then continue that second half before being called to the bar, and then going on to do your pupillage as well. It's an option that's there. I don't think it gets spoken about nearly enough. And I just want to make sure that you guys had all the information available to you. Where can you study the bar course? There are currently 10 bar course providers across the UK in about 19 locations. Here's a brief snapshot of them here, but again, we'll be sending the slides out if you need them. And how do you apply for the bar course? Well, you would do that through your chosen provider, not directly with your in. So much like a university application, you'll just contact the bar course provider you think is best for you, and then you kind of go through their process and whatnot. Scholarships and prizes. I think scholarships are really important, and I think that the majority of bar course students should probably try and apply for them. It's the IN's biggest source of funding for the bar course. I've got some figures on the next slide. All 4 INs have a scholarship program, and they offer scholarships for both the GDL and the bar course. So if you are thinking about transferring, then we can also help out with that as well. LinkedIn awards around 100 bar course scholarships a year, and all scholarships are means tested. So obviously the strongest applications might get some of the named awards, so the sort of like most prestigious awards, if you will, for having particularly strong applications. But the amount that they receive will be wholly dependent on their own personal finances, and not the finances of your family or anything like that. So if you've got £3 million in your bank account already, chances are we're not going to give you, you know, more money than we think you need in order to sort of get onto the bar course. But it's still a great prize to have on your CV, and will be really useful in terms of your career moving forward as well. We also have some other prizes. So we've got the Buchanan Award, which is £100 to students who achieve the highest percentile in the bar course. Student of the Year Award. So the wing gown is awarded to the top scoring students on the bar course. Probably costs a little bit more than £100 to be fair, those wing gowns. Newberg and Grinrod prizes. They are run by me, and these are our social mobility awards that are awarded to 16 students in their second year, sort of going into their third year. And there's a whole list of prizes that they will receive. So mini pupillages, they get to come to the Inn for a summer school, get to spend 3 days with me. So yeah, some of the best prizes available essentially. And we have our mini pupillage grant scheme, which runs all year round. If you are accepted onto a mini pupillage, we will give you money towards traveling to get there, accommodation fees, and even like we have a clothing allowance as well if you need to buy some new formal wear for the few days that you might be in chambers. So yeah, the deadline for bar course scholarships is the first Friday in November typically. So if you are in your third year now, if you just started in September, you would be applying now if you're planning on starting your bar course next September. So yeah, if you're planning on starting your bar course in 2025, you need to apply for your scholarship basically in the next few weeks in order to be well, in with a chance. The deadline to apply for GDL scholarships is the first Friday in May. So again, you would have had to done that sort of the May before for the next round of interviews, which are coming up. As I mentioned before, all of the scholarships are awarded on merit, but the amounts are calculated based on your own financials. All four Inns do have a scholarship program, but you can only apply to one at a time. We do cross-check and eliminate people who've tried to sort of apply for all of them. But yeah, just make sure that you are going with the Inn that you think is sort of where you want to be for your bar course. The differences between the four Inns, I don't think are that crazy, but you know, you might just feel a little bit more at home at one versus the other, and it's something you really got to consider when you're making that decision. So our bar course scholarship budget is about £2 million. As I mentioned before, we award 100 of those scholarship prizes a year, not 100 £2 million prizes, unfortunately. And the top award is the Lord Mansfield Scholarship. Then we have our GDL scholarship, which has a budget of £183,000, and we have up to 32 awarded each year. Again, all of these values are means tested. There are some additional benefits to being a scholar, such as free admission to the Inn and reduced qualifying session rates and a free call to the bar. And we also offer 14 rooms at the Inn as part of the prizes as well. So if you are particularly interested or you have a really good reason to stay closer to the Inns of court, maybe you're applying from outside the city, but your bar course is based in London, for example, I would definitely mention that you'd like to sort of apply for the accommodation scholarships, where we will give you some of the funds towards renting at, well, towards your rent here at the Inn as well. So again, another great opportunity for those of us who are traveling from outside London. Now, qualifying sessions. Does anyone know how qualifying sessions work already? Raise of hands. Like 3 of you. Awesome. So yeah, as part of your bar course, you will also need to complete 10 qualifying sessions. They typically take place at your Inn of choice. Yeah, there are 5 categories. So there's ethics, standards, and values, advocacy skills, legal knowledge, justice, and the rule of law, equality, diversity, and inclusion, and management of pupillage, career development, and well-being. What these sessions can be are any of these things, really. So lectures and advocacy workshops and ethics workshops. We have advocacy and ethics days. There are legal research seminars, debating dinners, and residential weekends. So there are a handful of sessions that have to be completed in person. Those are our interactive sessions that everybody will need to do at least some of as part of their qualifying sessions. So for those of us who are, again, from outside London typically, or maybe if you've got time restraints and traveling to and from it's quite difficult, we host our residential weekends. We can do a handful of qualifying sessions over the course of 2 or 3 days, as opposed to having to travel to the Inn for the individual sessions and such. Now, with the qualifying sessions, one thing to note is you do need to complete 10, but you also need to include at least one of each of the session categories. Some people like to keep it even and do 2 of each, because that makes 10, or they might do 1 of each and like 6 of another one, essentially, to make sure that they've got all 10 of the sessions and each of those are completed. And yeah, if you do come to dinners, the food's pretty tasty. So there's that too. Now, pupillage is the final stage of training to be a barrister. It consists of 1 year working in a chambers or other approved training organizations, such as the Government Legal Service. It's split into 2 sections, so the first 6 and the second 6. The first 6 is like the first 6 months, essentially. The second 6 is the second 6 months. After pupillage, if things all go swimmingly, you will either get tenancy at the chambers that you've done your pupillage with, or you might be moved to a different chamber to complete a third 6. Pupillage is incredibly uh, competitive. I would say in order to obtain pupillage, it can be quite a battle. And I'm sure our panelists will be able to speak on this a little bit more, well, from their own experiences. But it's if you do not receive or if you're not able to get pupillage the first time round, it isn't necessarily the end of the world. Many people do take 2 or 3, or maybe even sometimes more sort of years to obtain pupillage. It doesn't necessarily think that means there's anything wrong with you. There's just a lot of parkour students and much less sort of slots for pupillage. So stick at it, and yeah, hopefully all of you guys get it first try and it won't be an issue. But if not, the Inn also offers a lot of support through various schemes, and our Pupillage Foundation scheme is a great example of that, where you can get some advice if things haven't gone your way the first time round, at least anyway. Other opportunities and resources. Again, this will be sent out to all of you anyway, but for those of you who are not yet in uni, we have the bar placement scheme, which is run by the Bar Council, where there's work experience for 16 to 18-year-olds with barrister and advocacy training. And you can take a look at the Bar Council site for that sort of stuff. The Bar Council does all sorts. There's a pupillage fair coming up in a couple of weekends, which I'll be at with my counterparts at the other ends. They run online webinars and such as well, like the one coming up on the 21st or 4th or something, which I'll also be part of. So yeah, the Bar Council is a great place to start if you're looking for more resources. Then we've got Big Voice London, who have a variety of opportunities, including mooting competitions, essay prizes, and work experience. The Kalisha Trust, the Kalisha Trust have a lot of guides and information for those who are sort of at the beginning of this journey and what sort of things to expect. Prime have virtual legal work experience. The Next Step Foundation, again, for those who are a little bit younger, they have sort of preparation for university. And the Social Mobility Foundation has a law program as well, for those who are interested in that. This is obviously just 6 out of the many opportunities that there are. Individual chambers will also have competitions and prizes and events. The forums, of course, also run tons of things. We have events happening all the time, especially sort of at the beginning of the year. Some of you might be back in a few months' time as we run a university dinner. So we invite 5 students from every university to come to the Inn to dine. You'll get to meet with barristers and judges and have a meal with them, and also get to meet other students who are thinking about getting onto the bar course as well. So get your academics to keep an eye out for my email, because I will be sending it soon. Oh, great question. So with that, each university handles it a little bit differently. So we'll send out the invitations. Some tutors will just pick 5 students that they think they want to send. Others will host internal competitions. Some people don't get a lot of interest, so they just sort of take the first people who ask. It's going to be depending on your universities, but we will always endeavor to get as many students there as possible. So we might be reaching out in other ways as well, but just keep an eye out for the opportunities as we probably go out at the end of this year. But academics can be slow, as I'm sure all of you are aware already. So do try and be a little bit patient with them. My advice, keeping up to date with legal matters, I think is going to be a huge one. There are books about the law, not just law books, but written from people's experiences and other things you might need to look out for. The one example on here is The Path to Pupillage. Websites such as Legal Cheek are a great way to find, a collection of resources all in one place, so you don't have to dart around too much online. Utilize social media, start building on your networks. I'm sure many of you are part of societies and things like that. And obviously, if any speakers or people of interest have come to university for visits, or you've gone to events like this one, definitely recommend using things like your LinkedIn and other sort of social media platforms that might be advertised. Our Instagram and Twitter are pretty popping at the moment, so I would recommend following LinkedIn as well. Get yourself out there. I mean, obviously, being here, whether you're joining physically or online, is a great start. One, you get to meet other people who are kind of in a similar boat to you. Two, it obviously leads to other opportunities like speaking directly with barristers, which you might not necessarily get. So do back yourself and put yourself into those situations and get stuck in. Again, chambers and specialist bar associations also run events. So make sure you're doing your research and do a little bit of sleuthing to find out where relevant opportunities might be occurring. Insight days at the end, another great opportunity. I would recommend you see the other ones if you get the chance to, just to see one, what the other lecture theatres look like, but two, you'll get the chance to speak to different barristers, and the more sort of experience that you guys can gather, the more you can apply to your own journeys moving forward. And of course, you can just go to court to have a look at what's actually going on in the day to day and see where your expectations might be versus the reality of the situation. Quick show of hands, have any of you gone to court yet to see a case? Excellent. Good job, guys. But you haven't been here? That's crazy. Okay. When it comes to gaining experience, again, putting your best foot forward, asking, applying for mini puppillages via Chambers websites, asking to shadow barristers if you ever come across them. Worst thing they can really say is no. And when one says yes, then that's an opportunity that might serve you for the rest of your life, essentially. So do get stuck in. And yeah, use your societies as best as you can. Societies can be a great link between certain chambers or the Inns of Court, or specific barristers even. So you can really use the power of the collective in order to sort of build on your opportunities and take advantage of what the world of law essentially has to offer for you guys. And also there's things like your mooting and debating opportunities too. So just, yeah, do as much of that as you can, build on your experience. One more thing that I always forget to put on here, but I feel is very important, is also be yourselves. Everybody has their own interests and their own hobbies and things that they really enjoy doing outside of studying for the law. Maybe you've worked in retail for a few years or have had some of your first and second jobs already. All of that stuff is valuable experience. It's valuable because it makes you well-rounded human beings. Nobody would want a robot representing them in court. And the fact that you have, real life things that you do is only going to make you a better sort of barrister, essentially. And also when it comes to making small talk and having conversations and networking, if you're able to speak on some of your other experiences that aren't just sitting in lecture theatres, that's probably going to benefit you as well. So don't completely give up on the things you love in order to pursue this. Make sure you kind of incorporate them and use them to your advantage instead. That about wraps things up for my part. We are going to take a short break after this, but does anybody have any questions? Microphone. Microphone. That's okay.
I have two questions. It
Yeah.
doesn't directly link to the presentation and the panel discussion. Is that okay if I raise it anyway?
Yeah. See?
My first question is that as a Lincoln's Inn scholar and I've recently kind of taken part in summer school.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, when is the mini pupillage taking place?
Sure.
Do you have any idea of when it's going to happen?
Yeah, so September is a really sort of busy period for us coming back from the end of summer. So it's usually about setting up all of these events that are happening at this quarter. I'll probably start reaching out to chambers in the next few weeks for you guys.
Okay.
But when they get arranged, it's going to be down to your availability and theirs. So I will try and match you up with a chambers that focuses on the subject area that you're interested in.
Yeah.
And then obviously I'll let you guys deal with all of that work after that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is that as some of you may be aware as well, Lincoln's Inn hosts dinners at the MCR kind of quite frequently.
Okay.
And I was wondering if you want to kind of just have your dinner here with a family friend or like a close relative, are you able to do so? Or is there like certain days or times which you must come in, or do you need to book previously to attend?
Yeah, the MCR, for those of you who aren't aware, is the bar and restaurant that you can come to freely. It's open to the public. Opens pretty early. I want to say like 11 or 10:30 in the morning, and closes probably about the same time in the evening. If you like to visit with a family member, you can. It's open to the public. If there's a bigger than two of you, I'd probably recommend making a booking,
Yeah.
as with any restaurant, for lunch and dinner. As members as well, you will have the opportunity to, well, when you become members, you can dine in the Great Hall as well. We have members lunch every day. The prices are what I would say very good for this part of the city. And you are allowed to invite guests as well. So when you are at that stage, you can come and dine in the Great Hall too. And yeah, you would be able to bring guests. But again, you'll need to call ahead and make a booking if you are bringing people to that too. But yeah,
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Alexis.
no
I
worries.
just hope those weren't any sick
No, that's absolutely
questions.
fine. I'm looking forward to getting invited to dinner. Any other questions? Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you for your presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, I was wondering if you're offered a scholarship, can you choose which university you want to do the bar course in? So whether that's BPP or University of Law, for example.
So the choice of bar course provider will be yours regardless. All right. So the ghost, the ghost of BPP. Yeah. So no, you will still get to choose which bar course provider. I think that's usually part of the application process. I think they typically will ask where you're planning on doing your bar course anyway.
Yeah, I had another question, but I can't remember it right now. But
Sorry, you can always come
thanks
back to
anyway.
it. And one of you at the front. Yep.
Hi, I wanted to ask, as an international student,
Yeah.
how do you do the bar course? Does it extend your visa, like your student visa?
Oh, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I presume there is some sort of precedent for student visas and the bar course, but I imagine most of that will be handled with your bar course provider, as with any sort of university thing. I don't know if Anna, have you got any additional?
Reapply. Yeah. All right. Also, are the opportunities for international students as good as they are for at-home students for like pupilages and that?
Yeah, it depends on what the Hello. Yeah, it depends. There's no it generally the pupillage process is based off merit, so it's not to do with whether you need a visa or not. But obviously, if you do need a visa to stay and work, then it's a little bit different. I don't think necessarily is detrimental to you and any other international student that does need a visa. It's just that it's sort of an extra step in the process. But generally, pupillages are, and pupillage panels are seen across all kinds of different nationalities, and we do see that with our membership as well.
Does anyone?
My way.
Thank you. I just didn't quite get the mini pupillage aspect you were speaking about and linking up something with the desired area. So could you just explain what that meant?
Oh, I see. So with some of the prize winners, so I mentioned we offer some of the prizes.
Oh, yeah.
So if you are one of our prize winners,
Yeah.
then as part of your prize, we will organize it. Well, we'll help organize a mini pupillage for you.
Is that when you've done the bar course, I'm guessing?
This will be before you've done the bar course.
So when you get the scholarship, or while doing the bar course?
So the prize, the particular prizes are our Newberger and Helen Grindrod prizes.
Yes, that's the one.
Which are for second year, or students coming up to their second year of their law degree and about to
okay.
start their third year.
Oh, okay.
So during that, they will receive a mini pupillage organized by the Inn or me. And we ask students, those winners specifically, which areas of your law they'd like to sort of go into, and we will try and organize mini pupillages in that area of law for them. If you're going to do it yourself, then you can obviously just reach out to any set of chambers and ask them if you want to.
Is that something exclusive for second years or third year as well? It can,
It is mostly
like
for,
graduates.
it is mostly for second year
For second year.
students, yeah, because of the timing of all the prizes and such, it kind of needs to be
Yeah.
before the bar course and all of that jazz. So yeah, it's second year is
So being in my third year now, I'm guessing I've missed that opportunity. So is there something that I can make up for that? that's
yeah,
similar?
we have things like our mini pupillage grant scheme, as I mentioned before. So if you are able to get mini pupillage, we will obviously give you funding towards that, which helps a lot.
Okay.
There are obviously mooting and other opportunities as well. In terms of networking, we're always running events here at the inn, and things like the uni dinners again. We do typically aim for those who are at the beginning of their law degree. But if a tutor, has any sort of extenuating cases, or they think somebody else would be better for the opportunity, then we also will invite those students as well, and they can come and join us too.
I think my university never really said that there's a Lincoln's in prize for second year. So I'm finding out right now.
Oh
that
yeah, I'm
there was a
sorry.
thing. Yeah, I didn't know that before.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you want, we can have a little chat afterwards, or you can drop me an email and we can sort of figure out what went wrong there.
I'll just add that there are so many opportunities. It's not just for second year law students. So not just what the Inns of Court do, but the Bar Council do as well. And Alexis can run through those with you. But if you go on our website, there's a Becoming a Barrister guide, and there's a couple of pages there that list out quite a lot of the different opportunities. So yeah, if you aren't in your second year, then don't worry. It's not too late.
Yeah, it's never too late.
I just wanted to ask, if you apply to scholarships here, are you allowed to apply to them in the other inns as well?
No.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
That was a nice short answer, actually. I'm going to answer a couple of these online questions before the break that we're about to take. Somebody asked questions about the residential scholarships, the residential qualifying sessions. And again, those will be away days, is usually in some sort of conference center, and they'll have barrister members there and other volunteers to help run these sessions, and there will essentially just be qualifying sessions away. Usually the workshop are more interactive ones. A lot of questions about pupillage and sort of the application process and things like that. Again, those are going to be very apparent to you when you get there. The criteria again will sort of be laid out, but I do think that some of our panelists might be able to answer those questions a little bit better for you. So stay tuned in. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Somebody asked if the inn offers other sort of support for those with like chronic illnesses and such. Again, I think one thing to outline is obviously the inn will support its members and students as best as they can, but the majority of your bar course will be done with your bar course provider. So it would be good to speak to them about what sort of things they can put in place and what they already have. And then obviously we will accommodate where we need to. But again, if you're only getting into contact with us on rare occasion, or those 10 qualifying sessions, or maybe a couple more after that, and the majority of your time is being spent in Alexis Theatre at City University, it might be better for you to speak to the team at City about what they can help out with, especially because they'll be marking all of the formal examinations and things like that as part of your bar course. Right, I think that's about it. So we're going to take a short break. Hello, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed your break. But yes, as you can see, sat next to me are two real-life barristers who are going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to allow the audience here in person and those of you online to ask some questions in a little bit. But yeah, I'm just going to pass over to my friends here. So Sandy, would you like to start?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the inn. My name is Sandy Phipps. And as Alexis mentioned, I am a real life barrister, if you can believe it. I am in practice from a set of chambers just down the road in the Temple called 1 Essex Court. And what I do, and I'll come back to what I mean by this more precisely in a minute, I do commercial law, broadly speaking. So that's my field of practice. I had a slightly unusual route to the bar, perhaps. As you can probably tell from my voice, I wasn't born here. I was born and raised in Australia. I did a law degree there, and I started off my legal life in work as a solicitor. And so I was doing that for a couple of years, and then I decided I wanted to do some more study. And so I came over here. I managed to get myself a scholarship to come over here to do some more study. I did a master's in law, and I decided to stay. I went back to being a solicitor. This is in the city. And then after a few years, I decided to come across to the bar, which was something I'd always wanted to do. It was just the way that things were done in Sydney, where I used to work, where you'd start off as a solicitor and then go across to the bar. And generally speaking, different here, although not always. Perhaps we can touch on that later on in the questions. But so I'd always wanted to go to the bar, but I started off as a solicitor. And then after a few years in practice here, I moved across to the bar, cross-qualified as it were. And I've been doing that ever since, and that was about 2008. So it's been a good amount of time now. As I mentioned, my broad area of practice is what you might call commercial law, which is really any sort of dispute that arises in a civil context. So I don't do any crime, arises in a civil context where something has gone wrong in relation to somebody's conduct of a business. And that could be any sort of thing within a very broad range. Anything from a very dry and very technical dispute over, say, for example, delivery of a shipment of wheat, to allegations of serious wrongdoing like bribery, or indeed a case that I'm doing at the moment, which is about a firm of English solicitors who have allegedly been complicit in torture of people incarcerated in jails in a Middle Eastern jurisdiction. So it's a very broad area of practice, but I do that, as I mentioned, from a chambers called 1 Essex Court, and I'm self-employed. And so I don't have I'm not employed by any organisation. I practice from chambers, but we are a group of self-employed practitioners. And so ultimately we're responsible for the work we take on and for the work we do. And at the end of the day, we put our names on the bottom of every single document. And so it's what we do we have complete ownership of what we do.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Andy. And now Jack.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully I will be coherent because I think I've slightly overdone the espresso intake today. But my name's Jack Meek. I'm a barrister at the Government Legal Department. So unlike Sandy, I'm an employed barrister, and there are about, I think, 17–18% of barristers in this country are employed, whereas most are self-employed. But I had, in one sense, the theory was that I would have a fairly traditional way through to the bar, but actually the reality was it didn't turn out that way. So I did start by studying a law degree in my native Northern Ireland, before taking a year abroad to study in the United States. I came back to Northern Ireland, finished my law degree, did a master's in human rights, and then I came across here to do my bar finals back in 2012, and I was called to the bar at this in October 2013. And theoretically, law degree, bar course, you'd hope that pupillage was the natural evolution of that story, but it wasn't. It took me a long time to get pupillage because, as you may have gleaned, it is a competitive process. And believe me, I should preface at the beginning, like nothing that you hear from me today is meant in any way to put you off. And if you take nothing away from listening to me other than the fact that you should not give up, that would be the message that I would really drive home for you all today. Because within the period of my being called to the bar in 2013 and starting pupillage, having earned my pupillage place in 2018, I started pupillage in 2020. I did a lot of really interesting, varied things within that time. So I started by working as a paralegal at Herbert Smith Freehills whilst I was studying for the New York bar, and I subsequently became sworn in as a New York attorney. I then won a scholarship from this end to go and work in the European Court of Human Rights for a few months back in 2015, which it's frightening that that's 9 years ago. And then I worked for a legal publishing company to provide practical guidance for solicitors, barristers, lawyers generally in practice. So that was a company called Practical Law, which fits within the Thomson Reuters umbrella. And I was covering dispute resolution, arbitration, and then Brexit, whenever the original Brexit negotiations were going on. Eventually that led me finally to pupillage with government, which was the primary place that I had wanted to go. But I've calculated that throughout the period of doing my bar finals and applying, I maybe put in over 100 pupillage applications, had, perhaps a score of interviews and finally secured my pupillage place. Again, that's not to put you off. If anything, it's to say that I really didn't give up, because I was determined that nobody was going to tell me no whenever this was something that I wanted to do, and I would leave that message with you. So what do I do now? As I say, I'm a barrister in-house for the UK government. What that does not mean is I'm not a politician. I was reflecting whenever Sandy said you don't do any criminal law, and I don't do any criminal law. I just work on occasion with politicians, but I'll leave you to make your own joke there. And I've rotated and done a variety of things. So I started off doing immigration litigation throughout my pupillage. Then I was seconded out to a commercial chancery set of chambers for my second 6, before coming back in-house, where I had a stint in the Cabinet Office working on what became the Windsor Framework, but at the time was the Northern Ireland Protocol and some of the arrangements around that. I then did some commercial law within the Home Office before doing a 2-year stint in the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, where I was advising on a bill to sort of prohibit the importation of hunting trophies. I was advising on the ivory legislation that exists in this country and extending that to cover more species and a few other bits and pieces. And as of last month, I've recently joined the public inquiries team within government, where I've just started working on a few different inquiries. So you may see some of them pop up in the news. Thirlwall, for example, is the inquiry investigating the what happened in the hospital and sort of surrounding context around the Lucy Letby case. Post Office has obviously been a big one, which I've recently started on, and then Lampard inquiry, which is about the deaths of mental health patients at a hospital in Essex, suicides from those patients, and again, sort of looking into the culture and the decision-making processes and what perhaps led to that. So that brings me up to date here in that very potted history. But I think it's best to defer to you for all of your questions. Hopefully that gives you some food for thought.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Let's start with a couple online. I guess a question for both of you. How do you fuel your ambitions? How do you sort of deal with the sort of the thoughts in the back of your mind, and then continue to sort of push on and move forward? I guess it's yeah. Do either of you have an answer for that?
That's a very interesting question. I like to try and focus on parts of cases that genuinely interest me. I mean, the work of a lawyer is a busy one. It's a wouldn't say go so far as to say it's a grind, but it's it's a work that involves a lot of detail. And to be good as a lawyer, you have to be prepared to sit through and sit down and work through that detail when you need to. But we are nevertheless lucky, particularly barristers. I think barristers are particularly lucky to always do things that are interesting. Be it some of the work that Jack was talking about in the public field, or some of the areas of law that I look at in the private commercial field. We are the ones that look at the most interesting aspects of a case. And for me, I've always just really enjoyed the law. I've enjoyed reading about the law. I've enjoyed thinking about the law, and I've enjoyed arguing about the law, which is good because I'm a barrister. And so I keep myself going by really focusing on the parts of a case that I really enjoy. And if you can get up in the morning and say, look, today I'm going to find out an answer to this particular problem. This has been puzzling me for a week, for 2 weeks, however long I've had a case. I'm going to try and find out the answer to this question today. And once I've got it, I will have cracked that particular nut. And I find that very satisfying. It's something I've always found satisfying, to have a problem and to solve it. And so I try and keep myself going by, as I say, focusing on the parts of the job which are really interesting. And if you can do that, then the parts of the job which are more, which require sort of more rote processes, will take care of themselves. They're not the most fun things in the world, but relative to a lot of people, I think we have a lot more fun things to do in our job than non-fun things.
I think for me, going back, I suppose the first principles, because it took me so long to succeed in getting into practice, I know the value of what I have earned, and I try very hard not to lose sight of that. Part of the way in which I do that is to come along and speak to all of you here, for example, who are perhaps aspiring to come into this profession, and because it reminds me that there are a lot of people out there who really want to do what I feel proud and privileged to be able to do on behalf of other people. And so I think that keeps me going from a more philosophical point of view. And likewise, you know, I'm not going to pretend that there aren't days whenever you wake up and sort of like what Sandy was saying, you could be working on a piece of advice for, you know, sort of a few weeks, a few months. And I had this a couple of years ago where it was an untested issue as a result of sort of a grander change in rules, and nobody had looked at it before, and it was a really painstaking process because in a way I knew that what I was doing was not going to make certain people happy, but at the same time, I knew that I had to work through it methodically, and I produced a really good piece of work at the end of it, which then informed some of the other work that I was doing and helped with others who then subsequently dealt with similar issues. And there is something very satisfying about that. And I don't know, well, certainly there's nothing else that I can think of that I would want to do to get that sort of satisfaction. And yes, there are times whenever you think, oh, I could have an easier life by going and doing something else. But I think it's always tempting to think that the grass is greener instead of actually realizing that the grass is greenest where you water it, which was something perhaps quite trite, but somebody said that to me recently, and I thought that was a quite a good way of looking at it. And just, I suppose, more holistically, I think it's important, you know, I know more than many how difficult it is to succeed, and therefore I've been asked variations of questions, some more diplomatically than others, but how did you manage to keep going? And I think there is just remembering to have other interests as well that keep you refreshed so that you can bring your best self to your job, but also surround yourself with really good people. And I've been very fortunate in that, although I sort of, you know, come from you know, a background where there wasn't much money, for example, in the family. I was first generation to go to university. I always had a really loving family who really always encouraged me, and that has continued with you know, my wife and everything else. So I think it's important to surround yourself with good people as well. I apologize, I've probably strayed off track in terms of answering substantive questions about work, but I do think that these are important things to think about, because if you are really wanting to come into this profession, you need to be motivated, and I think you do need to have a realization about sort of all the various different factors that play into that.
Excellent, thank you. A couple of people online have also asked why Lincoln's Inn. Would you guys like to talk about why you decided to join the Inn?
Really nice buildings. No, my answer probably won't assist very much, but I can give a more helpful answer, and maybe Jack can elaborate. I'm not sure what his position was. I simply chose Lincoln's because I had a lot of friends who were already at Lincoln's, and so I chose it that way. Lincoln's is also, generally speaking, known as or has a reputation of being it's the Commonwealth Inn, so to speak, and so a lot of members of the Inn come from jurisdictions all around the world. And with my background in Australia, that sort of made sense. I think more prosaically, if you're coming to the bar through the traditional route, that is to say, unlike me, I came through solicitor's practice. If you're coming through the classic university route, then your choice of inn has a lot to do with your choice of places where you can get funding. So all of the inns, Lincoln's included, obviously offer a lot of funding each year for people to come and do their bar training course and or the GDL course if you need to do it, if you've not studied law as an undergraduate. And you know, if you're coming to the profession, then you ought to spend a lot of time on the websites of each of the inns. Not obviously Lincoln's is the best. Everything I say is premised on that. But you should spend a lot of time on the websites of all the inns, getting a sense of what sort of funding is available, what you might apply for. And if you're lucky, and if you apply for those sorts of funding, you'll do interviews. And if you're lucky enough to be offered funding, then that will oftentimes determine your destination in. But you know, I've got nothing but great things to say about Lincoln's, and it's a really welcoming place. and the Inn's doing a lot these days to make it a lot easier for people in your position to learn about what we do and potentially come and join us.
So I have two answers. I have the short, unhelpful one, and the other one, which is hopefully a bit more helpful. The short version is, at the time, I met a girl, and that relationship ended whenever I started the bar course. It's all right. I'm married to a wonderful person. I was introduced to the Inn through it was a mooting competition that I had done as an undergrad, where I met this girl because that's how cool I was at university. And I think that the competition was held here and in one of the other inns whose name will not be spoken. But I then, somebody who was coming, completely from outside the legal profession, not from this part of the country. I think that early introduction to the Inn was really good. It was what I knew. And then whenever I started to do a bit more research and realized, I think each of the four Inns will claim some credit for being the oldest. I'm not sure how they trace their records back, but so this Inn, I think it's the biggest, certainly. I think it had the most money available. It's most international, in which did attract me, even though I am from the Irish part of the United Kingdom. I was very, I had been fortunate enough to study abroad, and I like sort of being part of a wider international community. And then, because I'm a political geek, I knew that more prime ministers could trace their roots back to Lincoln's. And I suppose the point I'm making is that there's not really any right or wrong reason to join in. Each person will have their own preferences. I've heard people say flippantly they chose X Inn because the food was better, or X Inn because the entertainment was better, for example. But all I can tell you is that I have never for 1 second regretted joining this Inn, because the support this Inn has given me, both as a student and throughout those long sort of torturous years looking for pupillage. And then after that period, I'm now, I'm very involved with this Inn, not just doing things like this, but sitting on our bar representation committee, and then being delegated to sit on some of our bench committees to sort of help the next generation by interviewing for scholarships and things like that, or mentoring schemes, workshops. There's a reason that I want to give back, because to my mind, the Inn did and has and continues to do an awful lot for me. So I echo Sandy. I only have good things to say about the Inn, but you're absolutely right. You do your research, and I think you'll get an instinctive feel for the Inns and the people that you speak to. But it's hard to think of anyone that I've met at this Inn who hasn't been willing to help in some way, shape, or form.
Great answers. Thank you. One for Sandy. How did your experience as a solicitor compare to your experience now as a barrister?
It's a very similar fields, different jobs. As I mentioned before, I always loved the law. I studied it at university alongside humanities. I didn't think I'd love the law, but for whatever reason I did. And as a solicitor, I practiced in the litigation field, and so I was, as I said, same field, different role. I was working on the sorts of cases that I work on now, but I was doing very different things. And so as a litigation solicitor in private practice, doing the sorts of commercial cases that I've always done, your role is not so much one of a lawyer's lawyer, so to speak. So you're not really that involved looking at the law. You're much more concerned with managing people and managing what you might call bodies of evidence. And so a solicitor is the person who has the most contact with the client. So if the client has a particular grievance or needs a shoulder to cry on, the client will call the solicitor. They don't call us. We have very little contact with the client. If the solicitor needs to go and get evidence for one of the cases from the clients, and these days, of course, a lot of evidence which I deal with in the sorts of cases I do is copies of emails and things like that, which can run into the thousands or millions of emails, depending on the sort of case you're doing it. Solicitors do that. And solicitors manage the day-to-day work of a case in a way that we simply don't. So as a barrister, all self-employed barristers certainly who don't have the ability to work directly with underlying clients, lay clients, all we can do really is to advise on the law and act as advocates in court. And so our role is much more focused, and my role is much more focused on what I would like to call the fun stuff. So that is, as I mentioned, researching the law, thinking about the law, and then thinking about how you apply the law on the particular facts of the case. And so I don't speak to the clients very often. My main point of contact is the solicitors. Mainly when I talk to a solicitor, it's asking them to do things for me so they can get the material I need to go off to court to argue the case. And so I think that's fantastic. I think it's just, you get paid to sit in your room and think about things. I like doing that anyway. I'm doing that as a student, and so I think it's the best job in the world. And so the real point of difference between what I used to do and what I do now is that role. And that's not to say that the solicitor role isn't one that some people love. I spend a lot of my working life, the vast majority of my working life, sitting alone in my room, not talking to anybody. I work in a room with 4 closed walls. As I say, I can go whole days where I don't speak to anybody at all. I might have the occasional call, or I might pop out and say hello to my next door neighbor who's doing the same thing, to say hello. But a lot of my working life is spent locked away in a room. And to some people, that's just abhorrent. I've got friends who are solicitors who say, I couldn't imagine doing that job. I much prefer to be in a big, busy room full of other people. A lot of offices these days are open plan, and so everyone's always there. You meet in teams and you work in teams, and you rarely, the notion of a day not speaking to anybody is just impossible. So, some people love that. So it's very much comes down to your temperament, very much comes down to what you're interested in. And if you really enjoy working in teams and not being shut away in a room, then maybe the commercial bar is not for you. But if you're like me and you do, then it's the best thing in the world, really.
Well, another question here, probably last one before we go to you guys. I hope you've the brain juice has been flowing. What was it like studying the bar, Jack?
To be honest, sort of studying the bar, I think there's a lot of work to do in the bar course year within a very short space of time, and that's where the challenge comes in. I didn't find it any more difficult than undergraduate study. In many ways, undergraduate study was more difficult because you're, looking at things from an academic lens. So and I was ready to start sort of practical, simulated training as it is at the bar course level. So if you've been performing well in university, I don't think that the bar course is anything to be afraid of. And I didn't really have an awful lot more to add. You get sort of, early introductions to mock sort of witness handling, submission advocacy, conferencing skills, drafting statements of case, defenses, opinions, things like that. But I think it's just it's adjusting your mindset. It's okay, and we're doing things practically now, and we just have to get through an awful lot. And then I think whenever you can sort of adjust your mindset, things start to flow quite well. So if you are concerned about going from an academic discipline to a vocational one, yes, maybe sort of read into it, see what you think. But it's I sort of view the bar course as it's a necessary step that you have to go through before you can get to do the job for real.
Right, who's got any questions in the Edinburgh Centre? Raise hands. Okay, somebody right at the back. I'll start back there, then I can work. Oh, scared myself.
It's going to be really cruel if the next person's down at the front. Alexis.
Hi. So I keep hearing about the importance of networking. And as somebody from a lower economic background and with absolutely no ties to the legal industry, do you have any advice on how to go about this?
So I think from I'll start with a more cliched phrase again, but don't be backwards in coming forwards. I came into this profession, I didn't know anyone. I think it was the first many people as I got, it was through my mum who used to work in a travel agency and the son of basically everyone in Northern Ireland knows everyone apparently. But there was a lady that she sort of booked holidays for, and her son happened to be practicing here, and that was my initial sort of introduction. But I do think that if you sort of come, for example, you're on the bar course, come along to as many of the events and qualifying sessions as possible. And I do think that you know, the people that you tend to meet that are in practice that come along to these events, we are here because we are genuinely interested in the next cohort generations coming through, and we want to help. And so I would definitely encourage you to start sort of coming forward, and don't be afraid, send the cheeky pop-up on LinkedIn, and don't be afraid to sort of send a message. So the first job I ever had at home, whenever I was 16 years old, I was a greengrocer, and it was in a way, I still say that I learned more about dealing with people sort of just in that little market job than anything I've done subsequently. But my sort of old boss, he used to always say, like, you don't ask, you don't get. And that's what I would encourage you to do. And what's the worst that can happen? Somebody says no, and it's like, right, okay, that's fine, I'll move on. I wish I could tell you that there's some great trick to it that would unlock everything, but I think that you will develop your confidence as you go on. And certainly I would say, please don't be put off by the fact that you maybe don't come from what you consider to be a background that is underrepresented at the bar, because there are strides constantly being made for social mobility. I'm involved with the social mobility subcommittee at this Inn. I work with the Bar Council on social mobility issues. And so it is something that people are thinking about, and it just takes those of us who are interested to make our voices heard, to make sure that the bar does more closely resemble the populace that it seeks to serve. So please don't be discouraged. You're doing the right thing and come in here. If you want to grab a quick word afterwards, feel free to come down and say hello, and just do that with whoever you meet.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, 2 points really. The first is, as Jack said, really use the resources that are available to you. When I came to the bar, I think Lincoln's barely had a website, let alone programs, mentoring programs, information days, and the like, where you can really, you can meet people who are there, as Jack said, because they want to help, and you can find out a lot of information. So really use those resources. As I say, perhaps other inns might have similar sorts of things as well, and whilst they are inherently inferior, as previously discussed, you might look at those as well. And you can use those resources to sort of build up your own little network of knowledge. So do that. Get online, have a look, come to these sorts of events, all the rest. But the second point I wanted to make is that certainly in my own experience, some of the best networking is done by being the best sort of barrister you can be, or best sort of student you can be, or best sort of bar course student you can be, whatever stage you're at. By which I mean, one of the things that people most look for if you're applying for pupillage, for example, is just you have the potential to be a good barrister, and that means things like focusing on your academics. It means things like doing mini pupillages, or coming to demonstrating an interest in the bar. It means doing things that in your earlier years which relate to what we do at the bar, so things like mooting or writing essay competitions, those sorts of things. So don't networking is absolutely important, but certainly at the early years and the pre-bar years, if I can call it those, some of the best form of networking is making sure that you're in a position, so your CV really shines. It's not so much who you know about, really what you know. And if you do that, then you might find the network will come. I mean, my first job was at McDonald's. I didn't have a network I didn't even come from this country, so I had no network at all when I came to the bar.
Hi, I was just wondering, what factors would you consider to be the most important when you considered what chambers to apply to through the pupillage gateway?
I'm happy to start. Yeah. So as I said, well, government, it's a separate application, and so people are, ask the question about sort of self-employed bar and employed bar, and you know, I can sort of speak separately about that if it's of interest. But for me, it was about the type of work that I was interested in doing. And whenever I was a bar course student, I heard somebody from the government legal department sitting on one of these panels talking about their work, and all of a sudden something clicked. It's like, oh, I am a boring political anorak, but I want to be a barrister. So how do I do those? You know, how do I marry up those two interests? And then I heard somebody speaking about this, and to go back to your point on networking, then, you know, I went up to that person afterwards, and then I was able to sort of go in and sort of meet people in the office. And so I would be guided by what you think you are interested in. And even if that evolves over time, it might give you an initial idea to sort of hit up some folks from any pupilages or some of the people that you'll speak to. And I think that, you know, go in with an open mind as well. You could go in thinking, I really want to do sort of personal injury law or family law or criminal law. And then you go and do many pupillage, and then you think, oh, actually, do you know what? I didn't really like that, but I saw somebody else in chambers doing this, and that seemed really interesting. And that was how I started to piece sort of things together and different interests together. What's nice about what I do is that sort of in government, we're encouraged to move around quite a bit. So I go for, you know, a couple of years doing one thing, and I develop an expertise, and then I go somewhere else and develop a new expertise. And there's a skill, I suppose, that hopefully comes with that. So I would just be guided by what interests you. And on the gateway, I should say, just on that point that you raise it, Pupillage Gateway must advertise every pupillage that's available, regardless of whether or not the application is through the gateway itself. And I think there should still be a search function where you can search by location, you can search by practice areas. And going way back, that was how I started initially to filter down what was of interest to me. But definitely come to events, listen to people speak about what they do, and that might sort of trigger something in your mind. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. That sounds interesting. So that's my 2 cents.
No, I completely endorse that. You know, you really think hard about what you might like to do, because the reality is that if you get pupillage at a certain set of chambers, then the overwhelming likelihood is that your practice will develop in line with chambers profile. So if you go off and join, you know, a chancery set, then you are very likely to end up as a chancery barrister, ditto whatever field that you might choose. The bar is a lot more than it used to be. I'm talking 50 or so years ago, a very specialist world. And so we work in not so much silos, but we work in our fields, and to be frank, there are areas of law beyond that I have very, very little knowledge about, no more than a layperson, to be honest. So really do that research. Mini pupillages are really important, because you just never know what you're going to discover you like. It's bizarre. I mean, when I started my law degree, for example, I loved public law, I loved employment law, and I still do. But along the way, I found myself becoming interested in areas which I never thought I'd be interested in. And it's funny how the way the mind works. Funny how your interests work. So to cast the net as broadly as possible, to make sure that when you choose the ones you're going to target, you've made an informed decision. And also, again, spend a lot of time on chambers' websites. Most good chambers these days will make it clear that when they take on pupils, it's not a question of saying we'll take 5 pupils for one position of tenancy. Most chambers ought to make clear, if they're good, that they're taking on anybody who they take on as a pupil, they will consider for tenancy, provided they meet the requisite standard. And so in days gone past, you'd have chambers where you'd be pitted against each other as a pupil, for example. But as I say, most modern chambers will make it explicit that that's not the way they operate. So really have a look at websites as well and see what chambers say about what their pupillage policy is, and whether the expectation is that if you get pupillage and you do well, you will be taken on. There's not some question of there being two places available. So have a again, spend time online.
Could I just make one observation? You reminded me about something. Whenever it comes to your research and looking on websites, remember too that, like a lot of chambers websites in particular, they are very useful, but they are designed for professional clients as well. So a chambers might say, oh, we do this area of work, but it might be one person in chambers and it's a very small part of their work, but they're obviously selling their business model. So your research should be thorough and not sort of a superficial sort of cursory glance over things. And the best way, as we've both said, go out, get the experiences, and that will inform your decision.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Got to come down.
I do love these steps. Doesn't feel like you're going to fall over at all. We'll start over here.
Sorry, this is kind of building on from the previous question, but I was going to ask, like, to Jack, like, are there any specific advantages that you found from working in-house compared to working in the chambers?
Yeah, so I mean, I should start, I suppose, address the elephant in the room. I don't get an awful lot of courtroom advocacy, but I was very aware of that going in, and I suppose that for me, if I have to go in front of a minister or secretary of state, there's parallel there to going before a judge. I think that for me, working in-house, I mean, if I get the practical sort of advantages out of the way, I have a much more regimented sort of working period of time during the day, sort of set hours, which is helpful with, I have a young sort of family, so it's nice that I get to see my daughter in the evening, for example. And I get sort of civil service pension, I get holiday entitlement, and I think that sort of probably whenever you're at a very early stage, people don't really think about these things, but sort of the older you get, you realize actually a degree of security, especially if, like me, you sort of didn't really ever have that, is quite reassuring and comforting. From a more substantial point of view, all I can tell you is that the work that I do and have been doing since the beginning is often, very high profile, potentially very complex, much more so than a lot of my peers at the self-employed bar were getting at comparative levels of call and PQE. And for me, what attracted me to government in particular was the sort of bespoke nature of the advisory work that you do, actually helping to shape the development of the law itself. And I do work directly with sort of other policy civil service clients. So sort of day to day, we have both solicitors and barristers working in-house, first and foremost, often, where we are all considered lawyers. From my personal point of view, I think the way in which I have been trained and the way in which I look at things helps me approach my job, because I don't know how to do it any other way. So whenever I come to writing an advice, it's often informed, but I also think it helps whenever I work with externally instructed counsel, because I've been trained in that way of thinking as well. So I think that oftentimes, I know where they're coming from, and hopefully they'll have an appreciation for that. But certainly the main thing is the quality of the work, which I find initially really interesting prospect whenever I heard about it as a student, and I haven't been disappointed in what I do day to day. So again, it sort of it ties back to the question again about the different how you're sort of filtering down your choices, and I think be guided by what interests you, and it won't go you shouldn't go far wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. I also have a question for Jack, if that's okay. I am quite interested in the government legal department as well, and how it merges with the bar. I was wondering, how exactly did you commence into studying the bar in relation to the government legal department? And during your kind of study at school and your bar course, did you kind of undertake any mini pupilages or pupilages pertaining to the government legal department?
So I didn't do any specific sort of training with the government legal department. They do run, I think, a diversity summer school, so there are like sort of work experience schemes available at various points during the year. I knew from a young age that I like to talk, I like to argue. I was, born at the end of the 80s and sort of growing up with the last part of the Troubles and then the emergent peace process in Northern Ireland, and I was just therefore surrounded by law and politics. It was just in the context of where I'm from, and I suppose I just think naturally I therefore took an interest in it. So the law was always of interest to me, and then I always liked performing. And I thought, well, then the bar is what interests me. And I did many pupilages in sort of private barristers' chambers across a few different areas of law. But I had studied human rights at university as a master's student, and I had done some constitutional law in the United States. And so that interaction again between civil liberties and sort of the public law and decisions by nation states, that all had interested me. And then whenever I was a bar student and I heard somebody speaking about the government legal department, as I said earlier, something just clicked for me, and I haven't been disappointed. Was there another part to your question that I might have missed at the beginning? Yeah, so not during the bar courses. It was during the bar course that somebody had come in and I had heard them speak. But again, and so I was able to go and meet them in their offices whenever I was down in London. But I think because of the nature of the work within government, sort of mini pupilages and sort of work experience itself, whereas not that I won't volunteer Sandy for this, but so whereas other self-employed barristers might be able to say, oh yeah, come and shadow me in court, there's sort of more restrictions on my ability to do that. You'll appreciate because of the sensitive nature of working for government. But it was just conversations, and then the nature of the government legal department's application process is slightly different to chambers recruitment. So it's a civil service application as well. It's much more looking at competency-based questions. And so if you can get into the knack of answering those types of questions, I think that helps. And I think to the government legal department's credit, they're just interested in people who they identify as sort of meeting those criteria. So I don't think you're at any disadvantage if you don't do work experience with the government, if you can demonstrate that you've got the potential based upon the different competencies within our success profiles framework, for example.
Complete the journey down. Any other questions?
Hi, this is for Sandy. I wanted to ask, as a self-employed barrister, is it more difficult to find clients?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, in the sense that because you're self-employed, there's no security of the next case coming along. And so every self-employed barrister lives with this fear that one day the phone will stop ringing and everything will come to a crashing halt. So yes, so that's the reality of self-employment. But no, I mean, the reality is that certainly in my field, I think it's true to say of the bar generally, there's usually more work than there is people. You have to develop your own practice in the sense of your own profile. So you are the one to which work comes, and that's a function of many different things, including a lot of the things we've spoken about tonight. So doing your best and doing a good job on cases, and so you become known as somebody who has a safe pair of hands. Building up networks, as we said before, so you see people and they recognize you as a person of note in your field, and then you progress through your career, and you as I say, you continue to do your work at higher levels of seniority and complexity. Chambers also plays a big role. So particularly in your early years, if you join an established chambers, there's a lot of chambers are these days. In days gone past, chambers would be a lot of sort of 2, 3, 4 person chambers. They're much less common these days. Chambers are usually quite large organizations. My set of chambers has over 100 barristers in it, for example. A lot of work that comes into chambers, as I mentioned, particularly at the earlier years, is not allocated to any particular person. So a case comes in, a solicitor says, I need a barrister of who's either just qualified or 3 years in or 4 years in, approximating levels of seniority to do a case concerning X, and the clerks in chambers will figure out who's available, whose turn it is to get work and allocate it that way. Or alternatively, if you're in a set with King's Counsel in it, oftentimes they will get instructions and they will say, I need a junior to assist me, one or more juniors to assist me. In my field, it's can be lots of juniors sometimes, big cases, more than one KC sometimes as well. So you get work internally within chambers, so to speak. So Silk says, I need you to help me with this, and you do work that way. So there's more than one type of client. The great clients are the ones who know you and come and say, I've got a job for you, but there are many other different ways of keeping your practice going as well.
Thank you. So before you even think about pupillage, you have to, I think, go through this entire process of finding work experience, volunteering, mini pupillages, and other roles, which are incredibly difficult to find. So what's your advice on finding them? And let's say if somebody is doing their bar course and they're still not lucky enough to find diverse form of work experience, is that something that's going to be like a big threat when it comes to finding pupillage or establishing the name as a barrister?
No, I wouldn't say it's a threat. It's a nice to have. Almost all organised chambers will have on their websites their mini pupillage policies, and so you can, and there are various ways of going about finding who works in what field. For example, I know that there's a chamber's student guide, as they call it, which will tell you what sort of chambers do what sort of work. There are legal directories which are called Chambers UK Bar Guide or the Legal 500 Bar Guide, which will tell you who are the leading chambers in all sorts of different fields. So once you've got their names, just dive straight onto their websites, and they should have a mini pupillage application process, and you can just write in. I mean, I know that's the case with my chambers and many other chambers I know, and just hit them up. They say we have an open door policy usually to mini pupillage applications, so just write in. And make sure that if they say send us a cover letter and a CV, make sure that's all set up nicely. Make sure your CV is looking good. Make sure your cover letter is good. If you're putting in an application for a mini pupillage at a particular set that does a particular field, really think why it is that you're doing that. I mean, why is it that you're beyond obviously need to get experience, but if you're writing to a set that does a chancery set, for example, that does a lot of trusts, you could say, I've studied this, I thought it quite interesting, I'd like to see how it works in practice. Or conversely, I've never studied this, I've got no idea what it's about, but I'd really like to find out because I'm really keen on pursuing a career at the bar, and I'm really looking to find out as much information as I can. So as I said, really go to the chambers level websites, and there will be processes on there for applying for pupillages.
So then would you say that the academics are even more important than work experience? So the priority should be getting top grades versus getting top level mini pupillages or work experience at the two. If you had to prioritize which one gets you through the bar and through long term being a barrister and a successful one, what would you say it would be more of?
I would always say, and views on this will differ. Jack I don't know whether Jack has a different view, but other people will. I would always say that it's your academic performance, certainly in my field, that is the number one criterion. Yeah. Particularly in your later years of university, because I think the recruiters call it exit velocity. If you can say that, look, I've been at university 3 or 4 years, whatever it is, course that you're doing, and you can see towards the end of my degree that I'm really on this upward trajectory and I'm doing really well, I would say that is the predominant consideration for people looking upon your application and smiling on it. That said, things like mini pupillages are, that's not just particularly mini pupillages, I'd say, for the bar. That's important as well, because that demonstrates an established interest in the bar. Work experience in other fields is great. If you can take that opportunity to do it. But if your choice is if you're really set on the bar and you want to go down that route, fantastic. Your priorities, to my mind, would be focusing on academic achievement, and then alongside that, mini pupillage in sort of that order, to be honest. And then other sort of work experiences is a nice to have, but not in the critical basket.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 3 things quickly. Firstly, I'd completely agree. Bank your academics, because it makes things that slight bit easier potentially whenever you go forward, and you don't want to look back and regret, oh, if I had focused a little bit more, this might have been slightly easier. I got a 2-1 in my degree, and quite frankly, I know that I probably could have worked harder and pulled that up. And part of my motivation for doing a master's was to pull my grade up, and I got the first class degree in my master's. And I know now from being involved with scholarship recruitment, sort of where sort of marking guide comes in, and actually, you know, I theoretically shouldn't be at too much of a disadvantage in that scenario, but it's just, I think you just make things that slight bit easier for people to take initial attention. So the first thing I'd say is bank your grades. I mean, the second thing that I would say, which is linked to all of this, is don't be afraid of having to take your time as well. I know that you'll be in a hurry. You want to get on, and that's why you're asking, do I prioritize work experience over my grades? It's like, you will have time to get that work experience. You might find it easier if you can go in and say, I've got my first class degree in law and I really want to pursue this. So those opportunities will come, and time is on your side at this stage, certainly, and don't feel that you have to be doing everything in a particular order at a particular time. And then finally, I would say as well, it's sort of, yes, absolutely, go get many pupilages, but there are other things that you can do, and perhaps to enhance your prospects of getting a many pupillage. Remember that the courts it's free theatre. You can go in and watch court hearings. You know, sort of work that I'm involved with at the moment. You know, inquiries are often streamed online because it's a public forum. So if you're struggling, just go and watch, because what you want to be able to demonstrate is that you know what it is that a barrister does. You want to show that you're motivated to become a barrister. And the way you do that to begin with is to show that you know what the profession entails. And you're not going to know it unless you go out and sort of see it for yourself. And if initially all you can do is sort of go in and sit in the back of a courtroom and watch, you never know, grab a barrister, not physically, but whenever they're sort of on their way out, sort of, accost the barrister and say, oh, you know, I'm studying this, you know, I'm really interested. Any chance of having a chat, or is there anyone else you could sort of suggest that I go and speak to? And then just to wrap up the point on experience more broadly is, remember, it's the way that you sell it. If you're just doing things for the sake of doing it, but you're not actually reflecting on what it is you've learned from the experience, it's only going to get you so far. So whenever it comes to your applications, whether it's for many pupillage at this stage or pupillage or scholarship or whatever later on, you don't just want to say what you did whenever you went and did an experience. You want to say what you did, what you learned from the experience, and how you're going to apply that going forward. That's what I would suggest that you do. And remember that sort of everything you do is a learning opportunity. And if at the end of the day you want to be advocates where you are representing other people, you are persuading other people that your case is right on behalf of somebody else, start by doing that for yourself. Think of yourself as your own client, and how would you advocate your own case?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, so can you pass this to lady in the red, please?
This is about the pupillage gateway. So I know that you can apply before you start doing your bar training course. Would you recommend doing that, or is it better to wait? Because I assume you then get more chances if you did it earlier, or is it better to wait?
So you'd apply, you're suggesting applying early and then asking for a deferment, so to speak, on the basis that you're still. I think that's going to vary between chambers. I think some chambers, I think the default position, I think this would be something to check, and by all means just ask chambers. I think the default position is they'd prefer you to apply in the year to which you're going to join, because chambers needs to manage, you know, their sort of their pupillage burden. And, you know, whilst it's not impossible to get deferments, I think the usual expectation is you apply in the year, you know, the year before, the year when you're supposed to take up the pupillage.
And I think ultimately getting practice at doing them is no bad thing either. So yeah, it depends on when their recruitment cycle falls.
Hello. Hi. Just want to ask, what kind of cases have you guys worked on that stood out to you guys? Is there anything that comes into mind? I'm just curious if that's possible to share.
So I mentioned earlier some of the work that I was doing on trophy hunting, and it was just a really interesting project because it was a very short private member's bill, but it ended up sort of bringing in to play all of these different elements that you maybe didn't think about. So it was engaging sort of certain, not just domestic law, but international law and sort of issues with our relationship with the European Union, for example. Then just being sort of a fly on the wall to see sort of the politics behind, the decision makers, the people that I was sort of advising through my policy clients. It was just fascinating for me to sort of watch that, and it did mean that I had the opportunity to go into Parliament whenever the bill was being debated. So if you watch Prime Minister's Questions, for example, and you'll see the speaker and there's a box over his right hand shoulder, and the people that sit in there, they're officials, so civil servants, lawyers, rather than MPs. And so it was just really interesting that every possible sort of machination that could have happened, I think, during that work came up, and it meant that I was having to sort of learn very quickly, develop sort of skills. And also, I think what is just fascinating about working for government is, yes, primarily I am advising on the law, but the context in which I operate is very interesting as well, because the decision maker, at the end of the day, the person that you are ultimately advising, has to take into account other things as well, which if you're just looking at it through a dry legal lens, you maybe wouldn't actually think about. So it's just interesting engaging with all of the different participants in the sort of the legislative process. So it's not a case, but that's sort of fairly typical, perhaps, of some of the work you might do in an advisory capacity if you're a barrister for the government.
I think probably for me, the standout cases are usually those that involve a big international element. And to be honest, a lot of my work does. One of the great things about being in practice in London in the field that I do is that people positively come to London to litigate, even though the case itself might have absolutely nothing to do with London whatsoever, or the UK whatsoever. So I regularly work on cases where there are legal teams around the world in different jurisdictions, and I have to talk to foreign lawyers and get their legal advice about how the local law works and applies to the set of facts. We have to get their evidence sometimes, because even though litigation may be in London, we may have to apply the law of a foreign country. And in that case, we need to get evidence from the foreign lawyers telling the London judge how it is that the law of anything from the Netherlands to Libya to Egypt to Canada works. So those are the sorts of cases that really stand out to me. I could give you a number, but I mean, one of my first cases in practice was that when I just took tenancy. So I was I was a junior member of a very large team. Was this absolutely extraordinary fraud case where our client, which was incorporated in a Middle Eastern jurisdiction, it was a big industrial concern. So they did everything from the local licensee to make Pepsi. And they serviced oil fields. They did all sorts of things. It was a big old conglomerate. They discovered one grim day in the wake of the financial crisis that one of their senior managers had been busily using their name to borrow money from banks all around the world and steal it. And over about 10 to 15 years or so, I think that the total headline figure was that he had borrowed about $9 billion and pocketed, run away. He used some of it to repay the lending, but then stolen a lot of it. And that instruction led to several years of litigation around the world, pursuing the alleged fraudster, and then defending claims brought by the bank, saying, "Well, you've just borrowed a few $100 million off us. Can we have it back, please?" And that was very interesting, because I work for, as I mentioned, lawyers around the world. There are proceedings in the States. There are proceedings in the Cayman Islands, where some of these companies were incorporated, where you might expect money gets squirreled away. There are proceedings in the Middle Eastern jurisdiction. There are proceedings here, and that was great. And there was a real human aspect to it as well, because the chief alleged fraudster obviously enjoyed his lifestyle. And one particular hearing we obtained what's known as a freezing order, where we froze his assets, because we said they were allegedly the proceeds of a fraud, and he had to give disclosure of what his assets were. And one of his assets was a private zoo, which had everything from lions to giraffes to all sorts of things that were worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. So that was a standout case. In fact, I'm not involved in it anymore, but I think it's still trickling on in some jurisdictions.
And then
Thank
he
you,
tried to
appreciate
import their
it.
trophies here, and I said, "Hold on a second."
No. one of the reasons I enjoy coming to these events, this is just a gratuitous comment, is that people at the bar do so many diverse things. Like I love sitting here listening to Jack talk, he talk about his work in that field or in the inquiries field. And if you had a panel of 5 or 6 barristers here, everyone would tell you different things of what they do on a day-to-day basis, and it's just endlessly fascinating. You do spend a lot of time in your own field, but when you take a step back, the opportunities that the bar gives you to just learn about different things and do different things is just fantastic.
Right. Got a couple of questions online. That's what we get to. How did you fund yourselves during your bar course?
I didn't do a bar course, and so I because I was working at the time and I qualified as a solicitor, and the law firms I worked for paid for my solicitor's qualification training, and that is, to be frank, an advantage that they have in recruiting people. I was working when I was transitioning to being a barrister, so I didn't have to fund the bar course, and so that was a real advantage for me. But Jack may have had more.
Well, I had a scholarship from the university in Manchester where I was studying that sort of paid for half of it, and then I went to the bank and got a career development loan. And again, this is part of a learning experience. I'd taken some bad advice whenever it came to scholarship applications, so I didn't apply to this in for a scholarship at the time, but I was very impatient to get on. So even though I hadn't had success in another venture, where funding was concerned, I wanted to pursue the bar course. I joined Lincoln's Inn, and yeah, sort of pressed on. But I would encourage all of you who are thinking about the bar, definitely apply for scholarships, because sort of financial means should not be a bar, to use the word, to your joining the bar, if at all possible. So do seriously consider that. And I don't know at what stage, if you're all sort of law students, or if some of you are maybe studying something else with a view to doing the GDL later on, but we do, the Inn provides scholarships for the graduate diploma in law as well before you get to bar course stage. So funding is available.
Excellent. And someone else has asked, can Jack speak to the day-to-day work of a government barrister?
Oh, so it's a very open question, and I suppose my experiences to date have been very varied, and so there's no. I think every barrister will probably sit here and tell you in a different way. There is no typical day, but as I said earlier on, I've moved around different departments, divisions. So whenever I began, I was doing immigration litigation, sort of first day of pupillage. Here's 50 cases, off you go, with supervision, obviously. And then I was doing that, sort of drafting statements of case, working with sort of panel counsel, and then sort of observing. This was during the pandemic as well, so it was all remote at the time, but observing sort of established barristers in court on our behalf. Then I was seconded to chambers where I was doing commercial chancery practice, because I am a government legal professional. I could only take instructions from GLD, so I couldn't take private instructions, but I could work on other things that my chamber supervisor was working on, so drafting sort of opinions or various statements of case, sort of research tasks. Then I came back, and as I say, I was working in the Cabinet Office on Northern Ireland Protocol negotiations at the time, part of a sort of tight-knit team that worked on that, supporting my sort of supervisor and colleagues. And then I was in the Home Office doing commercial work, which was sort of government procurement. So that was an interesting 6 months, because that was sort of seeing how the way I looked at it was sort of like, whereas Cabinet Office is sort of like an octopus that sits at the center and sort of has its tentacles in so many different things, because things just sort of come by and you're coordinating with lots of different people. Working in the commercial group within government, you're sort of seeing the mechanics, I think, of how government works in terms of procuring public services, so that things happen hopefully seamlessly for those provisions of public services to yourselves. And then the advisory work in DEFRA was sort of working, being the lead legal support on the development of a private member's bill, sort of drafting statutory instruments, and then sort of providing advisory departmental support to prospective judicial reviews and things like that. So there's a huge variety, and what I'm doing now is very different again.
Right, we are pretty much coming up to the end, so we don't really have time for much more in the way of questions. But Sandy, do you have any sort of last bits of advice or anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, if you feel that the bar is something you want to do, really go for it. As Jack mentioned, you know, there may seem like there's lots of barriers, and it is, you know, it is harder to come to the bar than some other professions, because, you know, a lot of us are self-employed and like. But if it's something that you're set on, really do back yourself. I really encourage you to back yourself, because if you feel like you want to do it and you have a bit of a taste of it by doing things like mini pupilages and go, I want more, then it can be one of the most rewarding career paths you can follow. So I really do, if you're thinking about it, I really do encourage you to follow that through.
Excellent. And that?
Yeah, well, I would say 3 things to begin with, which is the first one, as I've tried to hammer home: really don't give up. And I hope that for most of you, if this is something you want to do, it will be a really smooth process, but don't despair if it's not. You will get there if it's something you want and you keep pushing at it. And in order to help you to do that, the second thing I'd say is to take every opportunity that comes your way, even if it's something that you try, you don't like, that is still useful experience. Thirdly, as I alluded to earlier, have those other interests to keep you grounded. But if I could, I'd like to leave you with something, which I've been very reflective this year, because at the beginning of the year, my grandfather sadly passed away, and in many respects, I wouldn't be here doing what I do if it wasn't for that very gentle man who was a gentleman, who, you know, sort of very humble beginnings. And the month after he died, my daughter was born, and I became a father for the first time. And so I've been very contemplative this year and thinking about all of the lessons that I learned just intrinsically from the benefit of having a really good role model as a child and into adulthood from my grandfather, and then thinking about the lessons that I want to pass on to my daughter and the next generation. And there was something that I'd stumbled across, which I thought fitted the bill quite well. And it was a friend of mine who had asked me to read an excerpt of this at her wedding. So I'm hoping that she doesn't mind me using it for this purpose as well. But I've read this to my daughter, and this is an excerpt, if you don't mind. And perhaps you'll find it really corny, but if not, you'll put up with it for a couple of minutes. And this is an excerpt from Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. So I'd like to leave you with this, if you don't mind. So, congratulations. Today is your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know what you know, and you are the one who'll decide where to go. Out there, things can happen, and frequently do, to people as brainy and footsy as you. And then things start to happen. Don't worry, don't stew, just go right along. You'll start happening too. Oh, the places you'll go. You'll be on your way up, you'll be seeing great sights, you'll join the high flyers who soar to high heights. Except when you don't, because sometimes you won't. I'm sorry to say so, but sadly it's true that bang-ups and hang-ups can happen to you. But on you will go, though the weather be foul. On you will go, though your enemies prowl. On and on you will hike, and I know you'll hike far and face up to your problems, whatever they are. And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I'm not really going to be able to top that. So, yeah, thank you so much, Sandy and Jack. Your advice has been invaluable, as always. Thank you to those of you who are in person, and thank you so much to those of you who have joined virtually as well. I've noticed there are still a couple questions online, so I will try my best to at least try and get those answers back to those people when I can. But otherwise, I will be concluding the presentation part of this event. And yes, thank you very much, everybody.